you have actually logged in for a Informatica job-oriented training, and in this training, as you might be knowing already from your training coordinators, that we are going to understand first in the first class. I mean, like basically you're going to understand what is a database, and we'll see what are the different types of databases that are available. And the second one is you'll understand what is SQL and how SQL will help you to communicate with the database, and we'll extensively understand the use of SQL and what are the different commands that we use in SQL, all those things. And the next one, we will understand about what is the basic PLSQL, like what are the basics in the PLSQL, all those things we'll understand. And the next one, we will talk about Informatica Power Center or the data warehousing basics. I'd like what is a data warehouse, what is the role of Informatica Power Center in the data warehouse. And the next one, we'll understand about how to design the data warehouse. So it's like basically how to model the data warehouse, that is your data modeling. And then next we'll talk about Informatica Power Center. Informatica Power Center that is the version 951, so that we'll talk about. And the seventh one is that we will understand about the UNIX and what is a UNIX, and shell scripting, how do you invoke the UNIX shell scripts from Informatica. So all these things we'll discuss. So this course is probably, I mean, initially we will have a class from 10:30 p.m. EST to 11:30 p.m. EST, as the training coordinators would have communicated to you. So when I say 10:30 p.m. EST to 11:30 p.m. EST, just convert according to your time zone. In case if you have logged in from US, this will be the time, and if you have logged in from India, so it will be for a first 10 classes, it will be from 8 a.m. IST to 9 a.m. IST. So this will be the time, and after 10 classes, when we communicate, then it is will go back to the normal schedule. So it's like 9:30 a.m. 9:30 p.m. EST after the 10 classes. So let me just rewrite here. After 10 classes, we will go back to the normal schedule, so which is 9:30 p.m. EST to probably around 11 p.m. EST. Okay, and we will basically in the Indian timing, so it will be 7 a.m. IST to 8:30 a.m. IST. So it will be for 1.5 hour class that time. After first 10 classes, we are going to switch back to the schedule. So in case of, I mean, for admin related stuff, all those things, so you can always reach out to, this is I'm giving you the number. In case for installations, all those things, you can reach out to Gangadhar. So we'll publish his number through the mails, and they will get back to you with all the setup and everything, whatever is required. So they'll get back to you, and based on the setup, you can continue with this is a point of contact for your admin issues. In case if your system is not working, if you're not able to practice, or you're finding difficulty in practice, or any type of an admin related issue, you have to always so in case of any technical issues, you can always reach out to me, and we will also publish our details and all those things. You can always come back to us and then do it. So the next thing that we are going to start right away, we'll jump into the training part. So first we'll understand about, in the today's class, I'll give you more inputs about what is a database and how the database technology is actually evolved. I mean, what are the different databases that are evolved, and how do you use a SQL, like what is an SQL language is all about, that we will understand. So as most of you might be already having an idea like what is a database is, right? So a database is nothing but a software package which will a software package, or you can call it as a software product as well. So software package is a more appropriate word. So software package which stores the data in tables, So what do you mean by a table? A table is nothing but which will consist of rows and columns, that is called as a table. So in your Excel sheet, if you open, right, so all of you would have seen an Excel, right? So if you have a rows and columns, that is called as a table. So database is a layman terminology that we use. So actual software package that is called as a DBMS. A DBMS called as a database management system. So this is a general terminology that we use for a particular database. So database management system. And see, the database management system is stores the data in the tables, but in between the tables you'll not have a relationship between the tables. So basically that's why it is called as a DBMS. Eventually the DBMS is again went in as RDBMS. What do you mean by RDBMS? It's nothing but the relational database management system. So when you say a relational database management system, the data what you store, let's say I have a multiple tables, one which will store the employee related data, another which will store the department related information. So it's like in your department table you'll store the department related information, and in your employee related table you'll store the employee related information. So something like a last name of the employee, or the salary of an employee, or the commission of an employee. Likewise you'll have some department number which will store. Let's say in this it will store the information as department number and department name, all these things which it will be there. So when you have two different tables, if there is a relationship between the tables, then that is called as an RDBMS. You are creating a relationship between the two different tables, that's called as an RDBMS. So that is called as a relational database management system. It's nothing but if there is a relationship which exists between the two tables, that's called as an RDBMS. Okay. So how many different types of RDBMS that we have in the market? So different companies or the different vendors have come up with their own products. So most popular databases that you see, Oracle is a very popular database. Now currently you have Oracle 12c is in the market. 12c is the latest version, and 11g is the older version. I mean 11g is the old version which it is there, and you have 10g, 9i, all these things are this. So what do you mean by G here? G stands for a grid computing. So if you say, if somebody asks you what do you mean by G, C stands for a cloud. Again, it's a cloud version of our clustered version of thing has come into the market. So G stands for a grid computing and C stands for a cloud. I mean it is even available on the cloud as well. So we'll talk about that, what is a cloud and all. So, and the other database that you have is an SQL server. So SQL server, this database is actually from Microsoft. So you might have heard about the company Microsoft. So this is from a Microsoft company. And similarly you have a DB2. DB2 is another database. This is from an IBM company. And you have even the other database called as a Sybase. Sybase was an individual, I mean it was a different company before when the database is actually invented. Or now it is an SAP company because it took over by SAP. It's an SAP company. Sybase is an SAP. And likewise you have even other databases like a Greenplum is an EMC Square product, and different MySQL. It was actually a MySQL was Sun Microsystem product. Sun Microsystems, now it is acquired by Oracle, so it is also an Oracle product now. So likewise you have various databases which are available in the market. You might have some more than 1,000 databases which are available in the market. So okay, so most popular databases what you come across is MS SQL Server and DB2, Sybase, and you also have a Teradata as your database. So Teradata is another database which is from Teradata Corporation, which is widely used in data warehousing for handling the larger amount of data. Let's say if your database size is more than 1000 gigabytes or 1 terabyte, more than 1 terabyte, then we go for a Teradata. So Teradata is again from a Teradata company. So you have a separate company for this, Teradata Corporation. Okay. So these are all the various databases which are available in the market, and these databases.
Hadoop is considered is a database too.
It is more like a file management system. Yeah, it's one kind of a database, but it is not as a structured database that you can call. Okay, so I said there are various databases. So you can consider even the Hadoop as one of the database, but it doesn't store the structured data. But when I say this DBMS and all, you go with a different databases. Okay, so in order to, now you know that each database stores the data in the tables, right? So how are you going to define the data structure, or how are you going to add the data, how are you going to read the data, or how are you going to modify the data? In order to do all these operations on a particular database, you needed a language to communicate with the database. That language is nothing but an SQL. So SQL stands for a structured query language. So this is like you can call it as a universal language to communicate with your database. So it's a common language to communicate with all these databases. This language is invented by IBM. So somewhere in between, between 1970s, this language is invented by. So you can, when I say a language which you are using is a common, I can use SQL to communicate with Oracle database. I can use the same SQL to communicate with SQL Server. I can use the SQL to communicate with DB2. So SQL is a common language to communicate with all these databases. All right. So this SQL is nothing but just like your C language, how you see the different types of syntaxes and everything. So this SQL is also a combination of different SQL commands and the different syntaxes which they have proposed. Okay, so we are going to understand the each and every command in SQL, how this SQL will help you to communicate with the database. Here we are going to understand about an Oracle database. See, we are executing all the SQL queries, whatever we are learning, we are executing on the Oracle database. Similarly, you can use a similar amount of SQL, similar kind of an SQLs in the other databases like SQL Server and Teradata as well. So now when you say SQL, see, the SQL is actually divided into, SQL is basically divided into 5 different types. So it's been classified into 5 different types. So when I represent that in the paint diagram, so let's say you have the first one is your, so this is your Oracle database, and sorry, any other database you can call it. So let me just give you this. So here it's called as a SQL. So again, your SQL is actually divided into 5 types. So when I say 5 types, so one is, so we'll discuss about each of them. So first one is your DDL. So that is called as a data definition language, and the next one is called as a DML, data manipulation language, and you call this as a DRL, so data retrieval language, and the next one is your DCL, data control language, and another is called as a TCL, so which is called as a transaction control language. So now we are going to understand what are the different commands that are used under the DDL, DML, DRL, and everything. So if you say the SQL is classified into this, so when I say DDL, DDL stands for a data definition language. So it's data definition language, and another is called as a DML. So DML stands for a data manipulation language, and the other is called as a DRL. So DRL stands for a data retrieval language, and the other one is called as a DCL. So DCL stands for a data control language. Data control language, which it is there. And the last one to go, that is your TCL. TCL is called as a transaction control language. So what do you mean by a transaction, and how, what is mean by a transaction and all that we'll understand when we go to the DML part. So here we have a data definition language, manipulation language, DCL is data control language, and this. So under a DDL, what do you mean by data definition language? It's nothing but it helps you to define the table structures. It helps you to define the database objects in your database. So what are the different commands that comes under the DDL? So that is your create is one command. Create is used to define a table if you want to define a view and all those things. And alter will help you to add the column, drop the column, add the constraint and all those things. And drop will be helps you to remove the table from the database. So, or remove the object from the database. So that we will use a drop. And the next one is about the data manipulation. Manipulation means modifying something. Manipulation is nothing but the modification. So if you want to add the data to the table, so then we'll use an insert statement. Whenever you want to modify the data in the table, then we'll use a update statement. Whenever you want to delete a row or multiple rows from a table, then we'll use a delete statement. So this DML is called as a data manipulation language, which helps you to modify the data, add the data, and everything that we do it. So the next one is your DRL, data retrieval language. So which it is called as, it helps you to read the data. Now you added the data to the table. How can I read the data? So that is nothing but a data retrieval language which helps you to retrieve the data. So you'll have only one command, that is select. It helps you to read the data from a table, or it will also help you to read the data from multiple tables. So you can even do that by using. So the next one is called as a data control language. So data control language, that is your grant and the revoke. So grant and the revoke are it's like whenever you want to assign the privileges to the other user, whenever you want to take back the privileges and all. So this part also we'll see in the later classes. And the next one is called as a transaction control language. Transaction control. So this is nothing but whenever you want to apply the changes permanently onto the database, and whenever you want to roll back the changes from the database, that is called as a commit and the rollback. Commit and the rollback are the two commands which helps you to maintain the transaction. So these are the different types of commands. We'll go in depth how to create a table and how to alter a table and how to drop the table and all. We'll clearly check first, and then we'll move on with the data retrieval language. All right. So far, what did we understand? We just seen that there are different commands which will help you to define the data, data objects, and which will help you to manipulate the data in the tables. So let's try to go in detail. So we'll straight away start with the DDL commands. And before that, let's understand about what is a database and how to connect to the database. See, this SQL is a language. You have to execute that language in the terminal, right? So how are you going to execute it? How can I execute the SQL? Okay. So you need to understand first about, in terms of Oracle, you need to understand what is a database and what is the user or a schema in the database. User or schema in the database. See, in order to connect, let's say in order to connect to the Windows operating system, you need to enter the username and password, right? So in the same way, in order to connect to the database, you need to enter the username and password so that you can connect to that. So who is going to create these users? Your administrators, database administrators will create it. Now the question is like, I have an Oracle database which is installed in my machine, right? Let's say this Oracle database or Oracle server which is available. When I say server, it's nothing but a machine where the Oracle database is installed. That's called as an Oracle server. Okay. So if you talk about this Oracle server, let's say this is installed in some machine called as 192.168.1.81. It's nothing but the IP address of that machine where your Oracle database is installed. So whenever you install the database, you'll have certain name that you give it. You name that database. So that name can be your ORCL, or you can use any other name, or I can use the database name as some EDW, or I can use the database name as development database. So which is I'm using for a development. So this is the database, and one database can consist of a multiple users. You can have n number of users. Okay, I can have one account to connect to the database, and each and every user can have an account to the database. So if you check this database, under a database you can have a multiple users. We'll come back to that. So in order to connect to the database, there are various ways. Okay, the way how you have an Oracle server software, that's an Oracle server software which you install, and similarly you'll have an Oracle client. So it's nothing but an Oracle client. Okay, so in order to connect to the server which is present in somewhere in, let's say this Oracle server is present in your US in the customer location. Let's say you are working for a Citibank project, and this your server is in the Citibank location in the US, but now I want to connect from India, right? So in order to connect from your machine, first what we'll do is in your machine we'll install Oracle client. So in order to connect to the Oracle server, see, any software that you see, that is like a client server architecture. In order to connect to the server, you should always have a client in your machine to connect it. So in order to connect to the server, first I'll install, this is my machine, I'll install Oracle client in this. And whenever you install Oracle client, there will be an environment which you get that is called as an SQL Plus environment. So what do you mean by SQL Plus? So SQL Plus is an Oracle proprietary environment. So it's like, when I say Oracle proprietary, you can execute only Oracle commands through that. You cannot execute SQL Server commands, or you cannot execute Teradata commands. Okay, so it's an Oracle proprietary command line interface, which helps you to execute the SQL queries. So whenever you install the Oracle client, then only you will come to know this SQL Plus is installed. Otherwise, you will not have. So using this SQL Plus environment, I can connect to the database. So whenever I execute a query here, my query will be sent to the server, and query will be executed here. Query can be anything, whether it can be an insert statement or update statement or a create statement, anything. Whenever I execute a query, it will connect to the server, and your command will get executed in the server. And then suppose, let's say if I write a query saying that select star from employees, okay, that query will be executed in the server, and it will return the data back to your client tool. So you need to see, right, what is present in the server. So how this Oracle client is connecting to your server? How can it connect? So this is based on the TNS. It's based on the TNS protocol. So it uses the internet and then connects to your this. So both are not connected in the same LAN, right? So if both are connected in the same LAN, it will uses the TCP protocol, else it will uses the internet protocol to connect. So it is somewhere in US, and I have to connect through the internet and then fetch the data over the internet. So this is how you execute it and then do it. So this is one way to connect to the database. So first, in order to connect to the database, install Oracle client on your machine and then connect to the database. Else, there is another way. You can use different other tools like your SQL developer. So you might have, you'll come to know what is an SQL developer. SQL developer is the freeware. It's a freeware you can download from Oracle site, and using this SQL developer, you can directly connect to the database. Do I need a client to be installed when I'm using SQL developer? Not required. So it is just a tool which helps you to connect. So when you say that, again it uses the TCP IP. It uses both the thing, and SQL developer is a freeware which helps you to connect. So Oracle client and your SQL developer, likewise SQL developer, you also have the other type of database tools, or you can call them as, you can call them as a database tools. What are the different database tools which helps you to connect to the database? One is SQL Developer, which is a freeware. This is from Oracle. And you have a PLSQL Developer. This is actually from Quest Corporation. You have a Quest company, so that. And another one is called as a Toad. Toad is from a Dell Corporation. So these are all the different database tools which helps you to connect. See, now the question is, why should I actually use an SQL Developer tool? Why can't I execute the queries from a SQL Plus? See, if you're executing from an SQL Plus, the user interface, what you see is not proper. I mean, it's like, it'll be just like I don't have here a Oracle client installed for you. Probably in the next time I'll show you how the Oracle client environment looks like. So it doesn't give you the proper formatting of the data. So, but your database tools will give you the correct picture, like how the data will be properly organized, so that you can easily understand what data is there in what column. But in the SQL Plus environment, it will be randomly organized, and the format of the data will not be proper in that case. So that is the reason most of the time in the real time we will not execute any queries in the SQL Plus environment. We'll always go by the SQL Developer or any other tool we'll use and then execute the queries. So this is how we do it. And here in the training, which tool we are going to use? We are going to use a SQL Developer to connect to the database, right? So this is how we are going to do it. So when you say user, by default, whenever you create Oracle database, by default some users will get created. That is default users in the database, default users which gets created, that is your HR is one user, Scott is one user, likewise different other users or gets created in the Oracle database. By default the user will be created. In case if you want to additionally add the users, that will be done by your database administrators. You don't need to worry like how I can create the user in the database and all. So when I say the user, so it's basically when I say the database, so this is my, let's say my database name is ORCL. Under the ORCL database, I have a different users. So let's say Scott is one user. Scott is one user. Let's say the another user is your HR is one user, and there might be the another user might be the, let's say like Karthik is another user. So this is another user. You can have a n number of users. See, in Oracle, this is a long-term concept you have to remember, okay? In Oracle database, whenever somebody say that user or a schema, both are the same. What do you mean by a user or what do you mean by a schema? Schema is nothing but the group of database objects is called as a schema. So one user can create their own tables here. So if you see your Scott schema or your HR schema, they can have their individual tables in the a particular schema. So it's like whenever you define, already the tables will be default, some tables will be created, something like DEPT, employee, and then jobs table, likewise location table. Likewise you'll have a different tables which gets created by default whenever you create the database. And now this one also, even in this table, I mean in this schema also you'll have a different tables like a jobs table, let's say the job history table. Likewise you'll have different tables in the different tables will be present in the each schema. So as a user, if you want to add your own tables, you can create it. Let's say Karthik is not a default user which gets created, right? So your database administrator has created. Let's say if you want to create a new this thing, you can create your own tables like ODS employee, ODS invoice, let's say ODS line item, like this. So different other tables. It's just information. You need not to worry what is this table about now. So it's just different types of tables that is present in the database. So here there are different schemas and the different tables will be created. So whenever you want to connect to the database, right? So let's say you go and join a project and they'll give you in order to connect to the database and then start verifying the data in the database or create the tables in the database, Whenever you go to that, you should ask the username to connect to the database. What is the username and what is the password? So these details will be shared when you join the project. Okay, so username, password, and then the host name where the Informatica Oracle is installed, and the port, in which port the database is actually listening, and host name, port, and the database name. So database name, or this is also called as a service name. It's also called as a service name, which it is there. So they'll give you the username and password. Let's say the username is Scott and the password which we are going to use is a tiger. Let's say the host name, or let's go with a HR schema only. Okay, so HR, and the password is HR, and the host name that we are going, whatever the host name. So basically, if database is installed in your system itself, then we'll use localhost. Let's say your database is available somewhere in the public domain or a host name, then in that case you can give the host name as a different one. Let's say 192.168.1.81, and the port number by default most of the time it will be 1521, and the service name is nothing but the database name, that is called as an ORCL. See, whenever you want to connect to the database, you need to have all these details. Then only you can connect to the database. If these details are not available, basically you don't have, then you cannot connect to the database. So you need to know all these details to connect to the database. Now, first we'll understand how to create a connection, or how can I connect to the database in the SQL developer. So we know that we are using an SQL developer here to connect to this. Okay, see, when the admin team set up the access for you, you'll have a SQL developer icon, something like this, on your database, or it will be just like a folder. And once you get into the SQL developer folder, you'll have an icon something like this, SQL developer shortcut. What you need to do is, this is the latest version is 4.0. It's a freeware you can download from the Oracle site. So now how do I open this? Just double click on this to open the SQL developer. So if you double click on this, it will open up your SQL developer, and I'll show you how to create a connection in this. Okay, so it's opening it. It'll take a little time to open when you initially do that. Okay, so let me just close it. Okay, okay, DBA connections we have. Okay, by default there are some connections which are already available. That means I already created some connection. So for practicing SQL, I would like to connect to another database. See, for each database you want to connect, you need to create one connection in the SQL developer. So how do you create? So you need to click on this plus button to connect. Okay, so just click on plus, and connection name, let's say you can give any name. Let's say I can give my name. So SQL underscore, let's say Karthik, that is this one, and the username, that is HR, and the password is HR, and the connection type, so always choose the connection type as a basic. If you are using a TNS, that means you should have an Oracle client installed on this system. I mean, whichever the system that you're connecting. Okay, so else you don't need to. So basic, and enter the host name. The host name is 192.168.1.81, and the port name is 1521, and the service name, what is the service name that you're connecting? That is your ORCL. See, when you go to the real time, is this the host name will be same? No, it will be different. Like this is our host name where our Oracle server is installed. There they might have a different host name. Host name will be changing all the time, and the database name also will be modified. Okay, so try to test the connectivity, whether it will help you to connect. See here, it shows here as a success. That means I'm able to connect to the database using these credentials. Let's say if you want to use save the password for a future without entering, you can just select it. Otherwise, you can just click on the save. You'll be able to see this connection here. Okay, now I have actually connected to the database. So as I said, HR is a schema which is already present. And there will be some default tables which will be present. So how can I see the default tables? You need to just click on this plus button to expand it. You'll see the different types of objects which are available. And when you go, you see the different tables here. When you click on the table, it will help you to show. So if you see, there are different tables which are present, right? Countries, departments. Did we create any table, or did your admin? So by default it gets created. Okay, not like only for a HR schema default tables will be present. Suppose let's say if there is a Karthik schema which is fresh created, I mean newly created, do you find any tables in that? No, you'll not get any tables, because basically that's a fresh schema and you have to start creating your own tables. Okay, and then basically eventually you'll understand that. Okay, now this is how to create a connection in the SQL developer, and you need to connect to that. So for that you need to have all these details. Okay, so to create these connections, in case if you have any issues, you can always refer back to the video, or you can just get the help from your admin team, so they'll help you to create the connection. So once you create for one connection, it's a common procedure. Okay, so you'll understand that eventually how to do that. Now this is a very basic thing that we have understand. Okay, now we understand what is a database and how to connect to the database, right? So next thing is we need to understand about how to define a table in the database, right? So what is a language that we use to define the tables? What type of language to define? So that is about your data definition, DDL language that we use. Okay, so let's try to define one simple table. Okay, before defining a table, you need to understand about what is the data type. What do you mean by data type? So data type is nothing but a which helps you to categorize the data. See, you have the different forms of data, right? I have a data which is a number, and I have a data which is a string. That's a alphanumeric or alphabetical characters, and I have a date which can be represented in the form of a date information. So I have a various types of data which is present. Data types are something that which helps you to categorize your data, like number related data you store in the number, and alphanumeric data you store in varchar. So likewise in Oracle you have a different data types. So what are the different Oracle data types? So we'll understand this. So the first one is, when you look at the Oracle data types, so the first one is your number data. So the number data, if I say number of 10, what does that mean? Number of 10 comma 2. So it will always see, when you say number of 10 comma 2, maximum it can store 10 digits, and after the decimal it will store 2 digits, maximum of 2 digits. That is the use of that. So does your number will store only the integer values? It will also store the decimal values. It can store the integers, it can store the decimals, all those things. I mean real numbers, basically the negative numbers, positive numbers, and all those things. And you have another data type called as an integer. So what does it do? It will store only the integers. It doesn't store the decimal values. I think it's called as a PLS integer. So anyway, I think integer is also there, PLS integer. So it stores only the integer values. See, in your C language you have a different data types, right? So in the same way, int, string, all those things, in the same way you will have here. So similarly we'll have a character. So let's say if I say character of 500, it can maximum store only 500 characters. So what does it will store? Does it store the numbers also? No, it will store only the characters, means only the alphabets. It will store only the alphabets here. So suppose let's say if I want to store the alphanumeric means it's like which contains a special characters, numbers. If you want to store the email address, let's say we'll write @ and then we'll also include some numbers, all those things, right? So if you want to store the alphanumeric values, let's say varchar 2 of 100, so this is nothing but a which will store the alphanumeric characters, which it will store. So these are the different Oracle data types, and which will store the date information. Whenever you want to store the calendar related information, calendar data or calendar date, your general date, let's say if you want to store the date of joining of an employee, or if you want to store the date of birth of a customer, all these things, or if you want to store a transaction date, when the transaction has happened, all those things will store it in the date. So default date format, what is the default date format? it will be dd-mon-yy. In Oracle, the date will be stored. What do you mean by dd? Day of the month. It's like 01 to 30, 01, 02, 03 and all. And month, MON is nothing but the month, January, February, it's a short form of the month. YY is nothing but the last 2 digits of the year. So whatever the last 2 digits of the year that you are storing, so that information will be there. So these are your different Oracle data types. Another one is Boolean. So what do you mean by Boolean? So it's like a true or false. So it will store the true or the false, and it will also store the null value. What do you mean by null? We'll understand. What do you mean by null? When you say null value, that will check it. So these are the different Oracle data types which we have. And whenever you are defining a table, like why are we learning about data types now? Because whenever you are defining a table, you need to understand what type of data that you are storing in that table, or what is each column data type that you are storing. So that is the reason we understand about these different Oracle data types, right? So let's try to create some table. See, what is the things that you have to remember whenever you are creating a table? First, you need to understand what is the name of the table that you are giving. You need to understand what is the name of the table. And the next one is how many number of columns you want to keep in that. How many columns you want to add. And third one is what is the data type of each column, and the precision. What is the data type and precision. What do you mean by precision? So precision is nothing but this one. See, if I say character of 500, varchar 2 of 100, this is called as a precision, and this is called as a scale. So it's like number p comma s. P stands for a precision, means number of maximum characters that can be stored. S stands for a scale. I mean how many number of digits that has to be there. So we'll represent it as number of p comma s. Whenever we represent this one, p comma s is nothing but the precision and the scale. So that's how we use it. So now let's say we have different tables which are available here. What I'll do is I'll try to create a table. See, table which will store the student information. See, basically I want to store all the students who are joining the different types of courses in our institute. I want to store their names. What is their email address, what is their phone number, what is their PAN card number, or all these details I want to store it. So I want to create one table. So whenever you want to create a table, right, so table name must be always less than 30 characters. It cannot be more than 30 characters, okay? And table name, you cannot start a table name with a number. I cannot name something like 1, 2, 3 ABC. I cannot do that. Always first letter should be an alphabet. First letter should be an alphabet. So you should use that. First letter should be an alphabet. It should be less than 30 characters. And the special characters allowed in the table are hash, dollar symbol, and then the underscore. It's like I can use it as ABC underscore 123. I cannot define a table ABC percentage 123. So special characters you can have only one. See, it is not only for table name. Any database object should comply to these standards. It should be less than or equal to 30 characters, and first letter should be always alphabet, and you can have a numeric values. Okay, so special characters which are allowed is hash, dollar, and the underscore. So this is your table name. So now I want to create a simple table. Okay. So how do we create it? Okay. So what is the syntax? So what is the command to create the table? Create. So how do you use it? So now how did I open this SQL worksheet? What you have to do is just right click on your connection and click on open SQL worksheet. So when you click on it, the new worksheet will be open. So how to create a table? So create table, and what is the name of the table? Let's say I want to give the name as student underscore April. So this is April batch, so I'm just giving it as a student underscore April. And whatever the column names that you do, that should be enclosed within the parenthesis. Okay. And now what are the details that you want to capture? I want to store the ID of the student. Okay. How can I call that? Student underscore ID. Most of the time, very frequently, the underscore is something that which we use in the general real time. Student underscore ID. So what is it? Whether it is a numeric or a character? It's a number, right? So we'll define it as a number. Let's say student ID cannot be more than 5 digits. So I'll define it as a number of 5. Okay. Then let's say what is the name of the student? Let's say we have two names. One is a last name. Last name is a character. So it can be an alphanumeric. So we can, sometimes we store, right, B dot, space, all those things. So somebody might have a John Smith or likewise. So they'll have a, in those cases, you'll store, let's say varchar2 of 100 means maximum 100 characters it can store. Let's say you want to store the first name also, and which it is called as varchar2 of 100, and this is also a 1. Let's say I want to store the course which they have joined for, or email address of the this one. So you store email address, so which is called as varchar2 of, let's say, 100. So this is also an email address. So I want to have only these columns for now. So each column should be separated by comma. When you are storing it, each column should be separated by comma. And it's always a good practice to end your SQL statement always with a semicolon. It's a good practice to end always with a semicolon. Now, if I go to the table, do I have a table called as student underscore APR here? Do I have it? No, right? So how do I create a table? So just select it, and in order to run the SQL statement, you can use this. Run, or you can use Control Enter, or you can use F9 on your keyboard. Okay. So to execute a SQL statement, use Control Enter or F9 in the SQL developer. F9 or Control plus Enter. So that is a Control Enter and F5 to execute the. So if I execute, hit F9, so it says that, what does it says? Student underscore APR is created. So which means the table is created in the database. Do you want to check this? So if I go here, so try to refresh by clicking on this, I'm able to see the student underscore APR table which has been added. So when you try to execute this, so we have a student ID, last name, first name, and the email address and everything. So this is what which is there. So how do I identify the structure of the table? So to identify the structure, let's say to identify the structure of the table, so we'll use a command called as a describe. Describe is a command to identify the structure. So what is the table name? Student underscore APR. So now let me try to use, I can use describe or DESC. So when I try to execute, this will display me the, what is the column name, what is the data type of this, so number of 5, varchar2 of 100 and all. So can I write something like this, DESC student underscore APR? So can I write the data something like this? If you try to execute, it's the same. Either you can use describe to identify the structure of the table, or you can use a DESC to identify the structure of the table. So what does it gives? So describe will give you the column, data type and everything. So this is how it will be provided. So do you have a data in this? We just created a table, right? So do you have a data? How do I verify the data? So using a select statement. So select, let's say if I write a query saying that select star from student. So select will retrieve you the data in the table. So select statement retrieves the or reads the data from a table or a multiple tables. So table or multiple tables. So if I try and execute, will I be able to see some data in this? No, I'll not be able to. Oops, this is not the one, sorry. So this is a table which we have created. So when you try to check this, there is no data which is available here. So this is how you can you can create a simple table in the database. So we'll continue from here in the tomorrow class and how to add the data, how to drop the tables, and how to delete the data, add everything. Those things we'll understand. Then we'll go to the select statement. All right. So for time being, you just understand what is a database, and if you already have the access which is set up, you can probably try creating some tables. Anyway, for today's class, you can just understand what is a database, different types of things and everything. So tomorrow we'll start with adding the data and all those things. We'll verify, right? We'll continue with some more DDL statements and the constraints and all those things. Okay. So let me save this. This is going to be an April batch. So tomorrow is going to be April, right? So we'll call it as April 2015. So I'm going to send this running notes to you. Okay. So this is just data SQL introduction. Okay. So still we have not started with anything. It's just that I've shown you how to connect to the database. So any questions here so far? Any questions so far, whatever we have discussed? All right. So if you're good with this, so probably we'll stop it here for today, and tomorrow we'll meet again to discuss the remaining things in the SQL. All right. Okay, see, the next activity that you have to do is, first thing, you need to get your VMs set up so that the Oracle database, SQL developer, everything should be set up so that you can start right away the practice, whatever is there. So we'll understand that. Okay, thanks.